I never used to mind routine eye checkups with my doctor. Okay, that's not completely true. There's a few of the routine tests that are not that comfortable, right? There's really bright lights that shine in your eyes, for a couple of them. There's the one test with the puff of air that hits your eye. It's actually called an air puff test. They touch your eye a lot, they numb your eye, and then they often dilate your eye, so you wear sunglasses indoors and outdoors for the rest of the day. It's not always the best. It was made more comfortable for me by the fact that I had an eye doctor I really appreciated. I got to catch up with him. He was happy and jovial. He told me about his growing family. He'd asked me about my life, and he'd asked me about my career. He made everything go a lot smoother. He was great. About 5 years ago, when I went in for my routine checkup, I was in the middle of all of those tests. He came in and he said, "Do you mind if we do a few more today?" I said, "No problem." I learned that there are more invasive tests than the ones that I just described. I got through those, headed back to my exam room, and waited for him to come in. When he walked in the second time, his face had changed. He sat down on a stool, rolled over to me, and said a sentence I'll never forget. He said, "If you were my family, I'd ask you to get an MRI. And I'd ask you to get it this week." I did get the MRI. And I got a diagnosis. A baseball-sized brain tumor wrapped around my carotid artery and my right optic nerve. I'd heard about people receiving life-changing medical diagnoses in books and articles and on TV, and I had a few friends. I never imagined it would happen to me. After a 20-hour surgery and a long time in ICU and a year-long recovery where I had some grueling time in physical therapy as well as occupational therapy, I began to slowly regain some actions like talking and walking. I was told over that time I probably wouldn't survive. I was told that basic functions that make up who I am, functions that I use as a professor and a teacher, like reading and writing, functions that I use as a runner and a hiker, using my legs and my arms, functions I use as a daughter and a friend, like listening and speaking. I was told those would probably be impossible. After all of that time, the surgery, the recovery, and all of it, I lost the sight in my right eye and the hearing in my right ear. But I gained something unexpected, and it led to an insight I want to share with you. I learned that we treat accessibility as a series of special accommodations, that we design our world in a particular way that I hadn't noticed before. Specifically, that there are cracks in the world's design I hadn't noticed. Until my diagnosis, I hadn't fully understood the way that for some people the world is designed. And that's saying something. I'm a professor of communication and information sciences. I'm an expert in theories of communication and civic engagement. It wasn't until this happened to me that I began to see what some people experience every day. Accessibility isn't a favor for those with special needs. It's a spark for innovations that can change the world. Learning that changed everything for me. What's accessibility? It's simply making sure no one's left out due to a physical, sensory, or cognitive barrier. If we're going to change mindsets, we need to begin with the words that shape them. Universal design is premised on a simple but transformative question. What if every space, technology, and form of communication was created so that anyone who wanted to use it could. Accessibility just means no one's left out. And if all that universal design did was remove barriers for those who currently face them, it would change the lives of 1 out of 4 Americans who currently face an accessibility barrier. That's 65 million people. But universal design aims to do more. Let's take a concrete example. Curb cuts. Curb cuts are a sloped area at a sidewalk intersection that connect the sidewalk with the street, originally designed for wheelchair users, but now widely recognized as a universal part of our streetscapes. Who uses curb cuts? Travelers with luggage, pedestrians with bicycles, parents with strollers, anyone with a walker, and more. I bet you've used a curb cut recently. They're not just for wheelchairs. In fact, wheelchairs are not the primary use of curb cuts anymore. So much so that the Stanford Social Innovation Review in 2017 coined the term curb cut effect. The curb cut effect is a phenomenon of disability-friendly features being used and appreciated by a much larger group than it was created for. That's universal design in action. Curb cuts are a legacy of the disability rights movement, which began in earnest in 1945, but didn't enjoy certain legal protections until the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed in 1990. The Americans with Disabilities Act changed many aspects of our society, but it didn't go far enough. For example, did you know that the ADA has not been revised, not once, since 1990? That's 35 years. Consider the implications of this. When the ADA was passed, the internet barely existed. There was no www in the public domain. It was 17 years before the first iPhone release. If you LOL'd, you were laughing out loud with people in a physical space together as you are talking. Artificial intelligence and digital mapping were science fiction. And if the music of the day is any indication, you were wearing hammer pants doing the hammer dance too, you can't touch this. We're still building our accessibility policy, including technological accessibility, based on those legal frameworks. We're designing the future with rules from the start of the fax machine era. The Fair Labor Standards Act, for example, intended to create job growth for those with disabilities by allowing employers to pay them less. In 2025, over 700 companies in the United States exploit this practice, paying those with disabilities as little as 25 cents an hour. My colleague, Dr. Kent Schaefer, the first culturally deaf PhD graduate of the University of Alabama, shares the way that students still must prove their deafness using outdated legal and invasive medical standards just to receive minimum accommodations to pursue a degree in higher education. Students across the country, not just deaf and hard of hearing, are forced to choose between paper and digital materials if they don't have a special accommodation, despite the fact that over 24 studies in the post-COVID era show the power of blended learning, using paper and digital materials together, and the way it boosts learning outcomes for those both in K-12 classrooms and in higher education. This outdated framework fuels a compliance mindset, where organizations often ask, what's the least we can do to avoid violating the ADA? They invest little to serve a few who may have the most legally defined needs. And they miss an opportunity to create something better. Deaf and hard of hearing communities are familiar with this approach. It's known as the lowest bar. Kent taught me there's a sign for it. But what if we began to think beyond the lowest bar. Curb cuts changed the world and created accessible intersections. We created curb cuts to comply with the ADA, but they worked for everyone. We got lucky. Imagine if we began to create things and spaces and technologies with universal design in mind from the beginning. Consider LiveScribe smart pens and paper. They combine handwritten notes with audio to create digital searchable records for the user. Multiple studies in the last 5 years have demonstrated the way that they boost learning outcomes already for students, both at the K-12 level and higher education. Imagine what future technologies we could create if accessibility was our starting point. A possibility mindset. A mindset that sees accessibility as a catalyst that creates ripple effects through our communities, that shapes better jobs, better schools, better health, and a better economy. After my surgery, the first question I had to ask was, how do I adapt to a world that might not be designed for me? When I woke up in ICU, my vision was impossible. As I slowly began to regain some of my sight, I still couldn't read. Even today, preparing for this talk was a struggle. For thousands of brain tumor and traumatic brain injury survivors, everyday tasks are a struggle. For some, we give up. But what if our public spaces could be designed so that we could both retain what we hear better and learn better? And what if in doing that, we made them fully accessible for everyone who entered? That's not the lowest bar. That's our boldest creativity and innovation. A new way to seek possibility and design our world. And the question isn't, can we do it? It's, why haven't we already? As I reflect on my journey and think about where everyone that I didn't think about before this happened to me has ended up, I think about it this way. When we design with a compliance mindset, we get the bare minimum. When we design with a possibility mindset, we get innovations that change lives. I know. It changed mine. It's possible for me to read. It's possible for me to walk. And it's possible for me to speak. The question ahead of us is simple. Would we rather design our world the old way, that accommodates a few based on an outdated compliance mindset, or a new way where we start by asking, what's possible, and build our world that way to create something new and get a world where we can eradicate the idea of the impossible for everyone?